My feeling about the market is this: if you're interested in the next few weeks or few months, I think that's anyone's guess. I think, flip a coin, do what you want. If you want to start talking about multi years out and resort back to what a stock market ultimately is, which is where you buy part ownerships of businesses, and those businesses will mostly do well or not so well depending on economies, then I would say I'd be quite bearish because I think things are going to get a lot worse economically, socially, and politically. So I'm not so concerned about the next 10% or 10 weeks. I'm more concerned about the 30 to 50% over the next 3 to 5 years. Probably one of the primary reasons to be at least concerned, if not outright bearish, the lack of following and improvement as those few stocks went up. 8 to 9 out of 10 times proved troublesome down the road. But I'll tell you what I've seen that I've never seen before in my 40 years. Given where market prices are, where valuations are, and given what the mood of the market is, the complacency among investors and the so-called professional public, with all the fundamental economic and social factors that one could argue that are as much bearish as they can make an argument of bullish, the fact that there's such a complacency and not a real fear at all that I see at all, even at these high valuations, suggests that what normally succeeds over time, contrarianism, is the thing to be, and be contrary to the popular opinion now that this market's going to just keep going up and up. Well, the only difference is between 87 and 2000 and 2008, there was the ability for the government to step in and bail out if we have a crisis. We no longer have that availability because we became so indebted and we're spending so much money each year more than we have. We will not have the ability to simply print 5 or 10 or 15 trillion, whatever it takes to whatever ends up happening, and have the market accept that as that's a net positive. That's the big change now. I don't think the cards can be played. And one of the big reasons is one of the 5 reasons of my Build the Ark is that political paralysis. Here in the U.S., I can only address in the U.S., Democrats and Republicans cannot go in a room and make any worthwhile legislation anymore. And on top of that, they each have a faction in their party that wants to move more extreme away from their center. So I don't believe if and when the next crisis comes that there's the political will to fix it this time. In the 40 plus years, I've seen 3 major financial crises. Each at the time was perceived as a major crisis, even though if you look at 1987, when the Dow was just a few thousand points, you would say, what big deal was that? But for that time, that was a significant financial crisis. Same thing in 2000 and 2008. But each time, the main thing that turned around for the market was the Fed acting in a much easier stance, creating all sorts of additional money and, of course, debt creation. The governments can no longer do that without fear because people have come to the conclusion that we're now getting to the point we may not even be able to make our interest payments. So that card that was readily available in those last crises, I don't believe is going to be readily available for the next one. Well, as we've destroyed the middle class for decades of mismanagement, we've also have basically destroyed the middle ground in the United States. People are at one extreme or another, and those who may remain somewhere in the middle feel helpless and actually fearful to speak up against one extreme or the other. And quite frankly, no matter what happens in the election now, whether Biden stays, whether they replace him, whether somehow he or whoever replace him wins or Trump wins, about half the country is going to be pretty well mad the day after the election. I don't think the election is going to solve anything. And what I think Ray Dalio is getting at is that because of that and this division, and we don't have to go far, we just have to turn on the nightly news, Dave, and look what's happening in Europe and how that breakup is occurring. Many people feel both Canada and the United States is its next stop. So I think he makes a very good point. I don't like talking about civil unrest. I don't want to wish it so I can point to everybody to see. I do think it's more likely now than in any other previous time in the stock market. The secular answer has been a division of income. It has been realistically where a small percentage of people have become increasingly wealthy while the bulk of the people have struggled due to enormous things that we can speak hours about. I believe the more we moved away from the moral compass that a lot of different religions respect, I'm not talking about any other one, and we lived within a means that worked for this country for a couple hundred years, a moral compass is basically gone and it's spun out of control. And to me, that's when we could talk about whatever subject you want. If we wanted to get down to the rawest reason, that's what I believe we would find. We've lost our ways as a society in the simplest, most commonality where people shared, where it didn't matter really what faith you were from, but you had a common respect and dignity and all that kind of stuff. And that's been dissipated, if not taken out of the equation in many areas of the world, not just here in the United States. There's a saying I like to say to people privately, and I'll share it with you publicly. I hope for the best, but I'm praying to prepare for the worst. And that's the reason of the building of the ark. And I think caution and extreme caution for a lot of people is very important. And that's why I just want to fall back on this. I don't want to take you away from where you wanted to go, but it's that complacency. Now think about what you just talked about. I think there's a lot of realistic support to what you just read. I really do. But if we would go out now and have a poll anywhere, at least in the United States, among the financial service industry and listen to those so-called professionals speaking, I doubt we would have heard any one of them or a very small minority express anything similar to what Ray Dalio just spoke about. Now, look where Ray Dalio is and look where some of those other people are. I think you have to at least respect what he's saying and try to justify how he may be wrong. I don't heard anything yet that you said there that I greatly disagree with. I've had a motto for over a decade, almost actually 15 years, that less is more. I lived it myself. I could conceivably have a bigger home. I could have a more expensive car. All those things is still to many people a way of life. I think we have to recognize that past generations, yours, family's, mine, did with a lot less, smaller dwellings, not as big cars, all that stuff, but they still got through. I think excess or living and trying to keep up, as we like to say, with the Joneses has led to a lot of our issues. That's the first thing I think we could control ourselves. The other thing is, and again, this goes back to what maybe separates me from a lot of people, because I wear my Catholic Christian faith on my sleeve. I really believe we need to return to recognizing that there's somebody far superior than us, and they're not running for president, or they don't run a big money management firm. And those words and those teachings need to be brought back into line and understood. And without it, I think we're a mess, and we're going to have much bigger problems down the road. I'll stick to what I said when it was under 1,300. I said we're going to get to 2536. 2536 isn't that far away now. It's a couple $100 from where we are today. I think the more important thing about price is, why has gold performed as it has, and why still have most investment advisors not embraced one of the 3 tier 1 investments you can have in the world? People got plenty of stocks, they got plenty of bonds, but they have very, very little physical gold in their portfolios. Yet it's the only one of 3 tier 1 investments you can make in the world. I think the reason is, and we're going to see it, and I'll come back and be the first to say I was wrong, but I think we're going to see a lot more advancement of the BRIC nations and where they're going as these fall meetings come together. And I think we're going to get a real minimum hint of how gold may play a role in whatever they're planning from the monetary side of things. I believe it's the single biggest reason. I think there's more, but I believe that's the single. And that's the reason why they can't take it back down, Dave. As you and I speak here today, we had another article again. The Chinese didn't buy and they took the market down $30-something. They did that a month ago and gold went higher than that in a couple of days. I believe the same will be the case here. The physical ownership desire for gold is surpassing the normal plays that are played in the paper market. And the key part of that is because gold's trading has moved away from the London, New York environment and to Asia and Shanghai. And that has really changed the perception and the reality of how gold trades. And and let me add this, because I used to get picked on because I never said the same positive things about silver, but right now silver has as good an argument in my book as gold does. So I think both of them will continue to perform well. And let's remember this, David, despite what all these other people like you to think, since the turn of this millennium, gold has outperformed stocks and bonds. Since 2000, and if you really want to go, if you go back 50 years or so when gold started free trading, it's now outperformed bonds. Okay. And yet, if you talk to any so-called typical financial advisor and said, I was thinking about gold as an investment or an income thing, they would say, you're crazy, you should own bonds. But meanwhile, listen, it's always going to be the Rodney Dangerfield, get no respect kind of investment. But I would just tell you this, I would not want to see most people that I meet, from working class right up to the athletes I dealt with, not having at least some gold in the portfolio. And let me tell you why. I always tell them, own some and hope it doesn't go up. And Dave, they all say the same thing. Mr. Grandich, why do you want me to buy something that's not going to go up? And my answer always is the same, Dave, because if it goes up a lot, chances are what you own a lot is going to go down. And I think gold minimally should be treated as an insurance policy. And yet most people have no real insurance on their portfolios not working out. It went up without getting that merited increase in chatter and talk and recommendations. It's still not. Most portfolios that are put out by the major brokerage firms have little or no gold ownership in it. It's gone up because people who recognize on what's happening with the bricks, and again, I'll eat these words if we get through the fall and it's not shown to be this. But I think we're going to realize that part of what's driven gold has been a movement that's going to come out for these countries to trade among themselves and also others with some form of gold backing whatever they end up, how they trade, whether digitally or physically or a combination of both.